The pen trembled in her hand as she stared at the divorce papers spread across her bed. Her husband stood at the doorway, arms crossed, watching her with eyes that held no warmth, no love, nothing but cold calculation. She could barely lift her head from the pillow, her body weakened by months of illness, but her mind was sharp enough to understand what was happening. He wanted out, and he wanted half of everything she had spent her life building. Her fingers shook as she signed her name on the dotted line, and as the ink dried on the paper, she watched him smile. It was not a smile of sadness or regret. It was a smile of victory. He thought he had won. He thought she was too sick, too broken, too defeated to fight back. But what he did not know, what he could never have imagined, was that she had been waiting for this moment. She had heard everything. She knew about the mistress, the phone calls, the poison his siblings had been feeding him for months. And while he had been busy counting her money and planning his future, she had been planning too. The difference was that her plan was already complete. Let me take you back to where it all began, because this story is not just about betrayal. It is about a woman who built an empire with her bare hands, only to watch the man she loved try to tear it all down. Her name was Diana, and she was not born into wealth. She inherited a small real estate business from her late mother, a woman who had worked herself to exhaustion trying to provide a better life for her daughter. When her mother passed away, Diana was only 25 years old, standing at the funeral with tears in her eyes and a single property deed in her hands. Most people would have sold that property and moved on with their lives, but Diana was not most people. She looked at that deed and saw possibility. She saw her mother's sacrifice. She saw a foundation she could build on. And build she did. Within 5 years, Diana had turned that single property into 10. Within 10 years, she owned commercial buildings in Lagos and Abuja, residential complexes that housed hundreds of families, and investment accounts that grew faster than she could count. She was relentless, working 16-hour days, negotiating deals that left seasoned businessmen shaking their heads in respect. She was brilliant, strategic, and unstoppable. By the time she turned 35, Diana was a self-made billionaire, and her name carried weight in every boardroom she entered. But success has a price, and for Diana that price was loneliness. She wanted someone to share her life with, someone who would see her not just as a business mogul, but as a woman who dreamed of love and partnership. That was when she met Marcus. Marcus was 30 years old when they met at a business conference in Abuja. He was charming, with a smile that could light up a room and a confidence that made people lean in when he spoke. He approached her at the networking event, introduced himself, and told her he admired everything she had accomplished. He said he was an entrepreneur with big dreams but limited resources, and he spoke about his vision with such passion that Diana found herself captivated. They talked for hours that night, and when the conference ended, they exchanged numbers. Marcus pursued her with dedication. He sent flowers to her office, called her every evening, and showed up at her business meetings with coffee and encouragement. He made her laugh. He made her feel seen. And when he told her he loved her, Diana believed him. They got married a year later in a beautiful ceremony overlooking the ocean. Diana wore a white dress that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime, and Marcus stood at the altar looking like a man who had just won the lottery. In many ways, he had. Diana gave Marcus everything. She funded his business ideas, invested in his projects, and opened doors for him that would have remained closed otherwise. She bought him cars, expensive watches, tailored suits, and took him on vacations to places he had only seen in magazines. She believed in him because she loved him, and she wanted to see him succeed. Marcus, for his part, played the role of the devoted husband perfectly. He attended her business events, smiled for the cameras, and told everyone how proud he was of his wife. But behind closed doors, Marcus was a different man. He resented her success. He hated that people introduced him as Diana's husband instead of recognizing him for his own accomplishments. He grew tired of living in her shadow, tired of attending events where she was the center of attention while he stood beside her like an accessory. His business ventures failed one after another, not because Diana did not support him, but because Marcus lacked the discipline and vision to turn ideas into reality. Instead of working harder, he blamed her. He told himself that she was too controlling, too overbearing, too successful for him to ever shine. And then Diana got sick. It started with fatigue that would not go away no matter how much she rested. Then came the pain, sharp and unrelenting, that made it difficult for her to move. She went to doctors who ran tests and gave her diagnoses that sounded like death sentences. Her body was failing her, and there was no cure, only management. Within months, Diana went from running board meetings to being bedridden, dependent on medication and caregivers just to get through the day. Marcus watched her decline with something that looked like sympathy, but felt like impatience. His siblings noticed the change in him. His younger brother, Richard, started visiting more often, always finding excuses to pull Marcus aside for private conversations. Richard was the kind of man who measured success by the size of someone's bank account, and he saw Diana's illness as an opportunity his brother was wasting. "You are still young, Marcus," Richard said one evening as they sat in the living room while Diana slept upstairs. "You have your whole life ahead of you. Do you really want to spend it playing nurse to a dying woman?" Marcus did not answer immediately, but the seed had been planted. Richard continued, his voice low and persuasive. "She has billions, Marcus, billions. You are her husband. You are entitled to half of everything. If you divorce her now, you walk away set for life. You can start over. Find someone who can actually enjoy life with you." Marcus thought about it. He thought about the years he had spent in Diana's shadow, the failed businesses, the whispers behind his back about being a kept man. He thought about the freedom that money could buy, the life he could live without being tied to a sick woman who could barely leave her bed. And then he met Jasmine. Jasmine was 28, beautiful and ambitious in all the wrong ways. She worked as a marketing consultant, and Marcus met her at a business mixer he attended alone because Diana was too weak to join him. Jasmine flirted shamelessly, and Marcus, starved for attention and validation, responded. They exchanged numbers, and within weeks they were meeting in secret, sharing drinks and dreams of a future that did not include Diana. Jasmine was not subtle about what she wanted. "You deserve better than this," she told Marcus one night as they sat in a hotel lounge far from prying eyes. "You are wasting your life taking care of someone who is only going to get worse. File for divorce, take what is yours. We could have an amazing life together." Marcus hesitated, but only for a moment. What if she fights it? Jasmine laughed, a sound that was equal parts seductive and cruel. "She is bedridden, Marcus. What is she going to do? Fight you from her deathbed? Be smart. Act now before it is too late." Marcus made his decision. He contacted a lawyer, filed the paperwork, and prepared to demand equitable distribution of Diana's assets. Half of the real estate empire, half of the investment accounts, half of everything. He rehearsed what he would say to her, how he would frame it as a mutual decision, how he would make it seem like he was doing her a favor by ending things quickly. But when he walked into Diana's bedroom that morning with the divorce papers in his hand, he did not bother with pretense. "Sign this," he said, placing the papers on her bed. Diana looked up at him with tired eyes. "What is this?" "Divorce papers. It is time we both moved on." Diana's hands shook as she picked up the papers and read through them. She saw the demands, the claims, the cold legal language that reduced their marriage to a financial transaction. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "Marcus, please," she whispered. "I know I have been difficult to live with because of my illness, but we can work through this. I love you." Marcus felt nothing. "Just sign it, Diana." And she did. She signed her name with trembling fingers, and Marcus took the papers, folded them carefully, and walked out of the room without looking back. He called Jasmine immediately. "It is done," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "I will have everything within months. We can finally start our life together." Jasmine squealed with delight on the other end of the line. Marcus felt like a man who had just pulled off the perfect heist. What he did not know was that Diana had been awake 3 months earlier when he stood in the hallway outside her bedroom, laughing on the phone with Jasmine. She had heard every word, every cruel joke, every plan, every betrayal. And she had made a call of her own. Hey my people, if you are feeling this story, drop a like and comment where in the world you are watching from. This is just the beginning, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Subscribe to join this storytelling family because things are about to get real. Now let's get back to Diana, because while Marcus thought he had won, he had no idea what was coming for him. Diana lay in her bed after Marcus left, staring at the ceiling. Her body was weak, but her mind had never been sharper. She reached for her phone with trembling hands and dialed a number she had called many times over the past 3 months. "Mr. Thompson," she said when her lawyer answered. "He just served me the papers. Everything is in motion." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Mr. Thompson spoke with quiet confidence. "Then we proceed exactly as planned. He will not see it coming." Diana closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "My mother always told me to protect what I build. I should have listened sooner." "You listened when it mattered most," Mr. Thompson replied. "Rest now, Diana, let me handle the details." Diana hung up and placed the phone on her bedside table. She thought about her mother, the woman who had worked herself into an early grave to give Diana a chance at a better life. She thought about the empire she had built in her mother's honor, and she thought about the man who had just tried to take it all away. Marcus thought he was clever. He thought he had planned everything perfectly. But he had made one fatal mistake. He had underestimated the woman lying in that bed. And now he was going to pay for it. 3 months earlier, before Marcus ever walked into that bedroom with divorce papers, Diana lay awake in the darkness listening to her husband's voice drift through the crack beneath her door. She had been trying to sleep, exhausted from another day of fighting her failing body, when she heard him laughing in the hallway. It was not the warm laugh she remembered from their early days together. It was cold, mocking, and filled with a cruelty that made her stomach turn. "She has no idea," Marcus said into his phone, his voice low but not low enough. "She thinks I am here because I love her. Can you imagine? A dying woman actually believes her husband cares about her suffering." Diana's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to move to confront him, but her body would not cooperate. All she could do was lie there and listen as the man she had loved, the man she had given everything to, revealed who he truly was. "I have been patient, baby," Marcus continued, and Diana realized with sickening clarity that he was talking to another woman. "But it will be worth it. Once she is gone, I inherit everything. Half of everything at minimum if I divorce her. Either way, we are set for life. You and me, Jasmine, we can have it all." The woman on the other end said something Diana could not hear, and Marcus laughed again. "No, she is too weak to do anything about it. She can barely get out of bed. What is she going to do, fight me? She signed her will months ago, and I am the primary beneficiary. I just have to wait a little longer, or better yet, speed things up with a divorce. Her lawyer will advise her to settle quickly to avoid stress. She will give me whatever I want just to make it go away." Diana closed her eyes, and tears slid silently down her face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. Pure, burning rage that cut through the fog of her illness and sharpened her mind like a blade. She had built an empire from nothing. She had clawed her way to the top of an industry that tried to crush her at every turn. She had honored her mother's legacy by turning a single property into $1 billion portfolio. And this man, this parasite she had married, thought he could take it all simply because she was too sick to stop him. He was wrong. Diana waited until Marcus went to bed that night, and then she reached for her phone with shaking hands. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. Gerald Thompson. He had been her lawyer for 15 years, the man who had helped her structure every deal, every acquisition, every legal protection she had put in place to safeguard her empire. She sent him a text message. "I need to see you tomorrow. Alone, tell no one." The response came within minutes. "I will be there at 10 in the morning." Diana set her phone down and stared at the ceiling, her mind already working through possibilities, strategies, and solutions. Marcus thought he was playing chess while she was too weak to move. He did not realize she had been playing this game long before he ever sat down at the board. The next morning, Marcus left the house early, claiming he had a business meeting. Diana knew better now. He was probably meeting Jasmine, planning their future with money he thought was already his. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, Diana forced herself out of bed. Her body screamed in protest, every movement sending waves of pain through her limbs, but she pushed through it. She had endured worse than this to build her empire. She would endure it now to protect it. Gerald Thompson arrived exactly at 10, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the concerned expression of a man who knew something serious was about to unfold. Diana's housekeeper, Mrs. Peters, showed him upstairs to Diana's bedroom, and he closed the door behind him before taking a seat in the chair beside her bed. "Diana," he said gently, studying her pale face and tired eyes. "What is going on?" Diana did not waste time with pleasantries. "My husband is planning to divorce me to take half of everything I own. He is having an affair and he thinks I am too sick to fight back. I need you to make sure he gets nothing, not one property, not one account, not 1 cent. Gerald's expression hardened. He had known Diana long enough to understand that she did not make accusations lightly, and he had seen enough marriages fall apart over money to know exactly what kind of man Marcus was. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling a legal pad from his briefcase. Diana told him about the phone call she had overheard about Marcus's mistress, about the years of resentment she had ignored because she wanted to believe in the man she married. She spoke calmly, laying out the facts like she was presenting a business case, because that was exactly what this was. A business case. The business of protecting everything she had built from a man who wanted to destroy it. When she finished, Gerald was quiet for a moment, his pen tapping against his legal pad as he thought. Then he looked up at her with the kind of smile that lawyers reserve for moments when they know they have a winning strategy. "There is a way," he said slowly, "but it will require moving quickly and it will require absolute secrecy. Can you do that?" "Tell me what you need," Diana replied. Gerald leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "Everything you own, every property, every investment account, every business asset is currently in your name as an individual. That makes it marital property subject to equitable distribution in a divorce. But if we transfer those assets into a family trust, specifically a trust registered under your late mother's name, then legally none of it belongs to you anymore. It belongs to the trust. And if it does not belong to you, it cannot be divided in a divorce. Diana's mind raced as she processed what he was saying. How long would it take? If we move fast 2 months, maybe less, we will need to create the trust documents, transfer every deed, every account, every asset into the trust. It will be complex, but it is completely legal. Your mother's name on the trust gives it historical legitimacy. We can structure it so that you remain the sole beneficiary and trustee, meaning you still control everything, but on paper you own nothing. Diana felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. What about Marcus? Will he notice? Gerald shook his head. Not if we are careful. He is not involved in your day-to-day business operations, correct? He does not review your financial statements or attend meetings with your accountants. No, Diana said. He stopped caring about my businesses years ago. He only cares about spending the money I give him. Then he will never see it coming, Gerald said. By the time he files for divorce, there will be nothing left to claim. Legally, you will be a woman with no assets, just a family trust that you happen to manage. Diana closed her eyes and thought about her mother. She thought about the sacrifices that woman had made, the long hours she had worked, the dreams she had deferred so Diana could have a better life. And now, from beyond the grave, her mother was going to protect Diana one more time. Do it, Diana said, opening her eyes and looking at Gerald with absolute certainty. Move everything into the trust, use my mother's name, make it bulletproof. Gerald stood and extended his hand. Diana shook it, and in that moment a partnership was formed. Not just between a lawyer and a client, but between two people who understood that sometimes the only way to win is to change the rules of the game entirely. Fam, if you are feeling this story, drop a like right now because Diana is about to show us what real power looks like. Comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to join this storytelling family. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Now let's get back to the story, because while Diana was building her defense, Marcus was digging his own grave. Over the next 2 months, Diana orchestrated the most elaborate legal maneuver of her life, and she did it all from her bed. Gerald worked with a small team of lawyers and accountants who signed strict confidentiality agreements, and together, they began the painstaking process of transferring Diana's entire empire into the family trust. Property deeds were re-registered. Investment accounts were closed and reopened under the trust's name. Business entities were restructured. Every single asset that Diana owned was carefully, methodically, and legally moved out of her personal name and into the trust registered under her late mother's name, Elizabeth Thornton. The paperwork was staggering, hundreds of documents, thousands of signatures. But Diana reviewed every single one, even on days when the pain made it hard to focus, even on nights when she could barely keep her eyes open. This was her life's work, and she was not going to let a single mistake give Marcus an opening. Marcus noticed nothing. He was too busy living the life he thought he had already won. He took extended lunch breaks that turned into afternoon disappearances. He came home smelling like expensive perfume that was not Diana's. He smiled at his phone constantly, texting someone who made him laugh in ways Diana never had. His brother Richard visited more frequently, always pulling Marcus aside for private conversations that ended with Marcus looking more confident, more entitled, more convinced that he deserved everything Diana had built. Richard did not care about his brother's happiness. He cared about the money he thought Marcus would share once the divorce was finalized. He had already picked out the car he wanted Marcus to buy him, the vacation home he wanted Marcus to fund, the lifestyle he wanted Marcus to bankroll. And then there was Jasmine. Marcus was not even trying to hide her anymore. He talked about her at dinner, mentioning a colleague who had great ideas for his next business venture. He showed Diana pictures of team events, where Jasmine stood just a little too close to him, her hand resting on his arm, her smile just a little too familiar. Diana played her part perfectly. She asked polite questions. She smiled weakly. She pretended to be too exhausted to care about the details of his life. And all the while she was counting down the days until the final transfer was complete. 8 weeks after her first meeting with Gerald, he called her with the news she had been waiting for. "It is done," he said simply. "Every asset is now held by the Elizabeth Thornton Family Trust. On paper you own nothing. In reality you control everything." Diana closed her eyes and let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for months. "Thank you, Gerald." "One more thing," Gerald added. "I reviewed the trust documents with 3 independent legal experts. They all agree that it is airtight. Even if Marcus challenges it in court, he has no legal standing. The assets were never marital property because they were inherited from your mother's estate and immediately placed in trust. He can argue all he wants, but he will lose. Diana smiled for the first time in months. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just won a war her enemy did not even know they were fighting. "Now we wait," she said. And wait she did. She waited for Marcus to make his move, knowing that every day he delayed was another day he spent imagining a future that would never come. She watched him grow more arrogant, more careless, more certain of his victory. She listened to him laugh on the phone with Jasmine, making plans for vacations and purchases and investments he would make with Diana's money. And then, one morning, Marcus walked into her bedroom with divorce papers in his hand. Diana looked at those papers and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She had been ready for this moment for 2 months. She had prepared every defense, anticipated every argument, closed every loophole Marcus could possibly exploit. But she did not tell him that. Instead, she played the role of the defeated wife one last time. She let tears fill her eyes. She let her hands shake as she reached for the pen. She let him believe he had broken her. And she signed. Marcus took the papers and left the room with a smile on his face. And Diana lay back against her pillows, exhausted but triumphant. He thought he had just secured his fortune. What he had actually done was sign his own destruction. Because in 3 months, Marcus was going to walk into a courtroom, expecting to claim half of $1 billion empire. And he was going to walk out with absolutely nothing. Marcus walked out of Diana's bedroom that morning feeling like a king. The divorce papers were signed, tucked safely in his briefcase, and his future was finally within reach. He practically ran down the stairs, pulling out his phone before he even reached the front door. The first call he made was to Jasmine. "It is done," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. She signed everything, no fight, no drama, just her signature on the dotted line. Jasmine's squeal of delight pierced through the phone so loudly that Marcus had to pull it away from his ear. "I knew you could do it, baby. I knew it. How did she look? Was she crying?" Marcus thought back to the moment, remembering Diana's trembling hands, the tears in her eyes, the way her voice had cracked when she begged him to reconsider. "She was broken," he said, and there was no guilt in his voice, only satisfaction. "Completely broken. She did not even try to fight me." "Good," Jasmine said, her voice dripping with triumph. "She should know what it feels like to lose everything. Now you can finally live the life you deserve, the life we deserve." Marcus smiled as he climbed into his car, a luxury vehicle Diana had bought him 2 years ago. Soon he would own a fleet of cars like this. Soon he would have mansions in Lagos and Abuja and anywhere else he wanted. Soon he would be the one people admired, the one people envied, the one people respected. Not as Diana's husband, but as a billionaire in his own right. "Meet me at the usual place," Marcus said. "We need to celebrate." "I will be there in 30 minutes, Jasmine replied. "And Marcus, bring champagne, the expensive kind. We are going to toast to our future." Marcus hung up and immediately called his brother Richard. The phone rang twice before Richard answered, his voice eager and expectant. "Tell me you did it." "I did it," Marcus confirmed. "She signed the papers this morning. No hesitation, no lawyer present, just her and me and her signature." Richard let out a low whistle. "You are a genius, brother, a genius. Do you know what this means? You are about to be one of the richest men in Nigeria. Half of her empire is yours. The properties, the businesses, the investment accounts, all of it. We are talking billions, Marcus, billions." "I know," Marcus said, and he could barely contain the grin spreading across his face. "I have been patient for so long, Richard. Years of pretending to care, years of playing the supportive husband, years of watching her build that empire while I got nothing but an allowance. But it is finally over. I am finally going to get what I deserve." "What we deserve," Richard corrected. "You have not forgotten about your family, have you? About the people who supported you through this?" Marcus rolled his eyes but kept his voice pleasant. "Of course not. Once everything is settled, we will all benefit. You, Sandra, everyone. I am not going to forget the people who stood by me." Richard's voice grew more serious. "You need to move fast now, Marcus. File those papers with the court today. Get the process started before she changes her mind or tries to pull some legal trick. Women like Diana do not stay down for long. She built that empire for a reason. She is smart, and smart people are dangerous when they are cornered." Marcus laughed, a sound full of arrogance and certainty. "She is not cornered, Richard. She is defeated. There is a difference. You did not see her this morning. She could barely hold the pen. She is too sick, too weak, too broken to fight back. By the time she realizes what is happening, it will be too late. The courts will have already awarded me half of everything, and there is nothing she can do about it." If you say so, Richard said, though there was a hint of doubt in his voice. Just do not underestimate her. I have seen people do crazy things when they are about to lose everything. She already lost, Marcus said firmly. Now I need to go, I have a celebration to attend. He hung up and drove straight to the five-star hotel where he and Jasmine had been meeting for months. She was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table in the hotel's exclusive lounge, wearing a red dress that turned heads as Marcus walked toward her. She stood and kissed him deeply, not caring who saw, and Marcus felt a rush of power that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the fact that he was finally free. They ordered champagne, the most expensive bottle on the menu, and toasted to their future. Jasmine leaned across the table, her eyes shining with anticipation. So tell me everything. When do we get the money? How long does the divorce take? When can we start living our real life? Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app where he had been keeping track of everything his lawyer had told him. The lawyer said it will take about 3 to 4 months for the divorce to be finalized. During that time, the court will review all of Diana's assets and determine the equitable distribution. Since we were married for 5 years and I can prove that I supported her during her illness, I am entitled to at least half of everything she owns. Jasmine's eyes widened. Half of everything? Do you even know how much that is? Marcus grinned. Billions. I do not have the exact number, but her real estate portfolio alone is worth over 2 billion naira. Then there are the investment accounts, the business holdings, the commercial properties. My lawyer estimates that my share will be somewhere between 3 and 4 billion naira. Maybe more. Jasmine sat back in her chair, a dreamy expression on her face. 3 billion naira. Marcus, do you understand what we could do with that kind of money? We could travel the world. We could buy homes in London, Dubai, and New York. We could live like royalty. We will, Marcus promised. And the best part is that Diana cannot do anything to stop it. The papers are signed. The process has started. In a few months, I will be a free man with more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. They spent the next 2 hours planning their future, talking about the places they would go, the things they would buy, the life they would build together. Jasmine suggested they get married as soon as Marcus's divorce was finalized, and Marcus agreed without hesitation. Why not? He would have the money to give her the wedding of her dreams, a ceremony so extravagant that people would talk about it for years. Hey my people, are you seeing what is happening here? Marcus is out here celebrating, planning his future, spending money he does not even have yet. But remember what Diana did. Remember that trust. If you are loving this story, drop a like and comment below. Tell me, do you think Marcus deserves what is coming to him? Subscribe if you have not already, because this story is about to take a turn that will leave you speechless. Now let's get back to it, because while Marcus was popping champagne, Diana was preparing for war. Back at the house, Diana lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling with a calmness that came from absolute certainty. Her phone buzzed, and she picked it up to see a message from Gerald Thompson. Papers filed. Court date set for 3 months from now. Everything is proceeding as planned. Diana typed a response. Good. Make sure you have all the documentation ready. I want every single piece of evidence organized and prepared. When we walk into that courtroom, I want there to be no room for doubt, no room for argument, no room for mercy. Gerald's response came quickly. Understood, he will not know what hit him. Diana set her phone down and closed her eyes. She thought about Marcus celebrating somewhere with his mistress, probably toasting to a fortune he would never receive. She thought about his siblings already planning how they would spend money that did not belong to them. She thought about all the people who had underestimated her, who had looked at her illness and seen weakness instead of strength. They were all about to learn a very painful lesson. Over the next 3 months, Marcus lived like he had already won. He stopped pretending to care about Diana's condition, barely visiting her bedroom except when he needed her to sign something related to household expenses. He took Jasmine on trips, flying to Abuja for long weekends, staying in expensive hotels, eating at restaurants where a single meal cost more than most people earned in a month. He bought Jasmine gifts, diamond earrings, designer handbags, a new car. He used Diana's credit cards freely, confident that soon all of this would be pocket change compared to the billions he was about to receive. When Diana's accountant called to question some of the expenses, Marcus waved him off, telling him that Diana had approved everything. The accountant, loyal to Diana, made note of every transaction and forwarded the information to Gerald Thompson. Richard visited often, bringing their sister Sandra with him. The 3 siblings sat in Diana's living room, drinking her wine and making plans for the money Marcus would soon have. Sandra wanted Marcus to invest in her boutique. Richard wanted a loan to start a real estate business of his own, never mind that he had no experience in the industry. Marcus promised them both that he would take care of them, that there would be more than enough money to go around. None of them noticed the cameras Diana had installed months ago. Cameras that recorded every conversation, every boast, every plan they made with money that was not theirs. Diana watched the footage from her bedroom, her lawyer sitting beside her, both of them taking notes. "This is good," Gerald said quietly. "This shows intent. This shows that he married you for your money and stayed for your wealth. This shows that his siblings encouraged him. This is exactly what we need." Diana nodded but said nothing. She was saving her words for the courtroom. As the court date approached, Marcus grew more confident. His lawyer assured him that the case was straightforward. Marital property, equitable distribution, standard divorce proceedings. There was no prenuptial agreement, which meant Marcus was entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage, and since Diana's empire had grown significantly during their 5 years together, his share would be substantial. "This is going to be the easiest case I have ever won," Marcus's lawyer told him during their final meeting before the court date. "Your wife has no legal grounds to deny you your share. The law is clear. You are her husband. You are entitled to half." Marcus smiled. "When do I get the money?" "After the judge rules in our favor, we will begin the process of asset liquidation and distribution. It might take a few months to sell some of the properties and transfer the accounts, but you should have access to liquid funds within weeks of the judgment." Marcus could hardly sleep the night before the court hearing. He lay awake in the guest bedroom he had moved into months ago, staring at the ceiling and imagining the moment the judge would declare him a billionaire. He thought about the look on Diana's face when she realized she had lost. He thought about Jasmine waiting for him outside the courtroom, ready to celebrate his victory. He thought about freedom. What Marcus did not think about, what he could not have possibly imagined, was that while he had been planning his future, Diana had been erasing it. The next morning, Marcus dressed in his finest suit, the one Diana had bought him for their wedding anniversary. He looked at himself in the mirror and smiled. Today was the first day of his new life. He had no idea it was actually the last day of everything he thought he had won. The morning of the court hearing arrived with a sky so clear it seemed to mock the storm that was about to break inside the courtroom. Marcus woke up early, adrenaline coursing through his veins like electricity. He had barely slept, his mind racing with images of bank accounts overflowing with zeros, property deeds with his name printed across them, and a life of luxury that was finally within his grasp. He stood in front of the mirror and adjusted his tie, the silk fabric smooth and expensive against his fingers. Diana had bought him this suit for 20,000 naira, but soon he would own closets full of suits that cost 10 times that amount. He smiled at his reflection, practicing the humble expression he would wear when the judge awarded him billions. He wanted to look gracious, not greedy. He wanted people to think he was a reasonable man who simply wanted what was fair. His phone buzzed with a message from Jasmine. "Today is the day, baby. I will be waiting outside the courtroom. After this, we can finally start our real life together. I love you." Marcus typed back quickly. "I love you too. This time tomorrow we will be celebrating. Pack your bags, we are going to Paris." He grabbed his briefcase and headed downstairs, where his brother Richard and sister Sandra were already waiting in the living room. They had insisted on coming to the hearing, claiming they wanted to support him, but Marcus knew the truth. They wanted to see the moment he became rich. They wanted to witness the transfer of wealth with their own eyes, so they could start asking for their share. "You ready for this?" Richard asked, standing up and clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "Today is the day you become a billionaire, brother. How does it feel?" Marcus grinned. "It feels like justice. I spent 5 years of my life taking care of that woman, supporting her business, standing by her side. I deserve this." Sandra smiled, but there was something calculating in her eyes. "You are going to take care of us too, right, Marcus? Family." "Of course," Marcus said, though a part of him was already growing tired of their expectations. "Once everything is settled, we will all benefit, but let's get through today first." They drove to the courthouse in Marcus's car, the same luxury vehicle Diana had bought him. Richard sat in the passenger seat, talking non-stop about all the ways Marcus should invest his money, while Sandra sat in the back, scrolling through real estate listings on her phone, already picking out properties she wanted Marcus to buy for her. Marcus barely heard them. His mind was focused on the courtroom, on the moment the judge would look at Diana's financial records and award him exactly what he was owed. His lawyer had assured him this was a straightforward case. Marital assets, equitable distribution, standard procedure. There was no way he could lose. They arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early, and Marcus spent that time packing outside the courtroom doors, checking his watch every few minutes. Jasmine showed up exactly on time, wearing a tight black dress and heels that clicked against the marble floor as she walked toward him. She kissed him in full view of everyone passing by, and Marcus did not pull away. He did not care who saw them anymore. After today, Diana would be his ex-wife, and Jasmine would be his future. "Are you nervous?" Jasmine asked, running her hand down his chest. "Not at all," Marcus lied. The truth was that his stomach was in knots, but it was not fear, it was anticipation. It was the same feeling he imagined people got before winning the lottery or closing a massive business deal. Everything was about to change, and he could barely contain his excitement. At 9 in the morning, the courtroom doors opened, and people began filing inside. Marcus walked in with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Mr. Adami who had a reputation for winning difficult divorce cases. Richard and Sandra followed, taking seats in the back row. Jasmine waited outside, texting Marcus encouraging messages every few minutes. Marcus sat at the defendant's table and looked around the courtroom. It was smaller than he had imagined, with plain wooden benches and fluorescent lights that hummed quietly overhead. But size did not matter. What mattered was the judge sitting at the front, and the decision that judge was about to make. And then Diana arrived. Marcus heard the courtroom doors open behind him, and he turned to see his soon-to-be ex-wife being wheeled into the room in a wheelchair. She looked frail, her face pale and drawn, her body so thin that her clothes seemed to hang off her frame. But her eyes, those eyes that Marcus had once found beautiful, were sharp and clear and focused directly on him. She was accompanied by her lawyer, Gerald Thompson, a man Marcus recognized from society pages and business articles. Thompson was one of the most respected attorneys in Nigeria, known for handling cases involving billions of naira and never losing. Marcus felt a flicker of unease seeing him, but he pushed it aside. It did not matter how good Diana's lawyer was. The law was the law, and the law was on Marcus's side. Diana's wheelchair was positioned at the plaintiff's table, and Gerald took a seat beside her, arranging a stack of folders and documents in front of him with methodical precision. He did not look at Marcus. He did not acknowledge anyone in the room except Diana, leaning close to whisper something in her ear that made her nod slowly. The bailiff called the courtroom to order, and everyone stood as the judge entered. Judge Okonkwo was a woman in her late 50s with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun and glasses perched on the end of her nose. She had a reputation for being fair but firm, and she did not tolerate nonsense in her courtroom. "Please be seated," Judge Okonkwo said, and everyone sat. She looked down at the case file in front of her, flipping through pages with a slight frown. "We are here today for the divorce proceedings between Diana Thornton and Marcus Cole. Mr. Adami, you represent the defendant." Marcus's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor, we are here to finalize the divorce and address the equitable distribution of marital assets." Judge Okonkwo nodded. "And Mr. Thompson, you represent the plaintiff." Gerald stood, his voice calm and professional. "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well," Judge Okonkwo said. "Mr. Adami, you may present your case." Marcus's lawyer stood and walked to the center of the courtroom, holding a thick folder filled with financial documents. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of marital asset distribution. My client, Marcus Cole, was married to Diana Thornton for 5 years. During that time, Mrs. Thornton accumulated significant wealth through various business ventures and investments. As her husband, Mr. Cole is entitled to 50% of all marital assets acquired during their marriage. Fam, can you feel the tension in that courtroom? Marcus is sitting there thinking he is about to become a billionaire, but Diana is sitting across from him with a lawyer who never loses. If you are on the edge of your seat right now, drop a like and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? This moment right here is what everything has been building up to. Subscribe because you do not want to miss the next episode. Now let's get back to that courtroom because things are about to get real. Mr. Adami continued, his voice confident and assured. Mrs. Thornton's real estate portfolio is valued at approximately 2.3 billion naira. Her investment accounts hold an additional 800 million naira. Her business holdings in various companies total another 500 million naira. That is a combined total of 3.6 billion naira in marital assets. My client is requesting his lawful share of 1.8 billion naira, along with spousal support during the transition period. Marcus felt his heart racing as he listened to his lawyer lay out the numbers. 1.8 billion naira. It sounded even better hearing it said out loud in a courtroom. He glanced over at Diana, expecting to see defeat in her eyes, expecting to see her crumble under the weight of what she was about to lose. But Diana's face was expressionless. She sat in her wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap, watching Mr. Adami with the same detached interest someone might have while watching a television show they had already seen before. Mr. Adami pulled out document after document, presenting bank statements, property deeds, business valuations, everything that proved Diana's wealth. He placed each document on the judge's bench, building his case piece by piece, brick by brick. As you can see, Your Honor, Mrs. Thornton has substantial assets, all of which were acquired or significantly increased in value during the marriage. Mr. Cole sacrificed his own career opportunities to support his wife during her illness. He deserves to be fairly compensated for his dedication and sacrifice. Judge Okonkwo looked at the documents, flipping through them carefully. "These are impressive assets," she said. "Mrs. Thornton appears to be a very successful businesswoman." "She is, Your Honor," Mr. Ademi agreed. "Which is why my client is entitled to share in that success. He was her partner, her support system, her husband during the years she built this empire." "I see," Judge Okonkwo said. She looked over at Gerald Thompson. "Mr. Thompson, does your client contest the divorce?" Gerald stood slowly, and there was something about the way he moved that made Marcus shift uncomfortably in his seat. "No, Your Honor, Mrs. Thornton does not contest the divorce. In fact, she welcomes it. However, we do contest the claim regarding asset distribution." Mr. Ademi frowned. "On what grounds? The assets are clearly documented. They exist. They were acquired during the marriage. There is no legal basis to deny Mr. Cole his share." Gerald smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made the temperature in the courtroom drop several degrees. "That is where you are mistaken, Mr. Ademi. The assets you have presented do exist. They are real, they are valuable, but they are not marital property." Marcus felt his stomach clench. What was Diana's lawyer talking about? Of course they were marital property. Diana owned them. She had built them during their marriage. They had to be marital property. Mr. Ademi voiced Marcus's thoughts. "Your Honor, with all due respect, that makes no sense. Mrs. Thornton owns these properties. She owns these accounts. She owns these businesses. How can they not be marital property?" Gerald walked to the judge's bench and placed his own stack of documents in front of her. The stack was twice as thick as Mr. Ademi's. "Because, Your Honor, Mrs. Thornton does not own any of these assets. She never did. They belong to a family trust, established 30 years ago by her late mother, Elizabeth Thornton." The courtroom went silent. Marcus felt like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. He looked at his lawyer, who was staring at Gerald with confusion and growing alarm. He looked at Diana, who was now watching him with eyes that held something Marcus had never seen before. Not anger, not sadness. Something far more terrifying, satisfaction. Gerald continued, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Every property, every account, every business asset that Mr. Ademi presented belongs to the Elizabeth Thornton Family Trust. Mrs. Thornton serves as the trustee and primary beneficiary, but she does not personally own any of it. The trust was established before her marriage to Mr. Cole, and all assets were properly transferred into the trust within the first year of the trust's creation. Since none of these assets are personally owned by Mrs. Thornton, they cannot be classified as marital property. And if they are not marital property, they cannot be divided in this divorce." Marcus could not breathe, he could not think, he could not process what he was hearing. This could not be happening, this could not be real. Mr. Ademi scrambled to respond. "Your Honor, this is the first we are hearing about any trust. If such a trust exists, we demand to see proof. We demand to see the documentation. This sounds like a last-minute attempt to hide assets from their rightful distribution." Gerald did not look worried. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment. "Of course, Your Honor, I have all the documentation right here." He began placing papers on the judge's bench. Trust documents, transfer deeds, account statements, legal certifications. Page after page after page of evidence that proved every single thing he had just said was true. Marcus watched in horror as his future evaporated before his eyes. And Diana sat in her wheelchair, silent and still, watching her husband realize that he had just lost everything. Judge Okonkwo adjusted her glasses and began examining the documents Gerald had placed before her. The courtroom was so quiet that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears like thunder. He watched the judge's face, searching for any sign of doubt, any indication that she might reject what Diana's lawyer was claiming. But with each page she turned, her expression grew more serious, more certain. "These documents appear to be legitimate," Judge Okonkwo said finally, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Mr. Thompson, walk me through the timeline. When was this trust established?" Gerald stood with the calm confidence of a man who had prepared for every possible question. "The Elizabeth Thornton Family Trust was established 30 years ago, Your Honor, when Mrs. Diana Thornton was only 5 years old. Her mother, Elizabeth Thornton, created the trust to protect the family's assets and ensure her daughter's financial security. When Mrs. Elizabeth Thornton passed away 15 years ago, Diana became the sole trustee and beneficiary of the trust." Marcus felt his hands shaking. He clenched them into fists under the table, trying to steady himself. This could not be real. Diana had never mentioned a trust. In 5 years of marriage, she had never once said anything about her assets being protected. She had let him believe that everything she owned was hers personally, that when they got married it became theirs. Mr. Ademi jumped to his feet, his voice sharp with desperation. Your Honor, even if this trust was established before the marriage, any assets acquired during the marriage should still be considered marital property. Mrs. Thornton's business grew significantly during her marriage to my client. He supported her. He encouraged her. He deserves to share in that growth. Gerald shook his head slowly, and Marcus hated the pity he saw in the lawyer's eyes. That would be true, Mr. Ademi, if Mrs. Thornton had personally acquired any assets during the marriage, but she did not. Every property purchased, every investment made, every business expansion completed during the marriage was funded by the trust and immediately transferred into the trust. Mrs. Thornton herself owns nothing. She manages the trust. She benefits from the trust. But she does not personally own any of the assets your client is claiming. Judge Okonkwo looked at Mr. Ademi. Do you have any evidence that Mrs. Thornton personally owns any of the assets listed in your claim? Mr. Ademi opened his mouth, then closed it again. He shuffled through his papers frantically, looking for something, anything that could save his case. But Marcus could see the truth dawning on his lawyer's face. They had nothing. All their research, all their preparation, all their confidence had been built on a foundation that did not exist. Your Honor, Mr. Ademi said, his voice strained. We were not made aware of this trust during the discovery process. If Mrs. Thornton had been forthcoming about the true ownership of these assets, we would never have. Mrs. Thornton was under no obligation to disclose the trust during discovery, Gerald interrupted smoothly. The trust is a separate legal entity. It is not party to this divorce. Mr. Cole's attorney asked for a list of assets personally owned by Mrs. Thornton, and we provided exactly that. The list was empty because Mrs. Thornton personally owns nothing of significant value. Marcus felt like he was falling, like the ground had opened beneath his feet and he was plunging into darkness. He turned to look at Diana, and for the first time since entering the courtroom their eyes met. She was not crying, she was not gloating. She simply watched him with an expression of absolute calm, and Marcus realized with sickening clarity that she had been planning this for months. Maybe longer. She had let him file for divorce. She had let him present his claims. She had let him believe he was going to win. And all the while, she had been holding the one card that would destroy him completely. Your Honor, Marcus said, standing up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. She is lying. She has to be lying. I have lived in those houses. I have seen the bank statements. I have watched her run those businesses. Those assets are real and they are hers. Judge Okonkwo looked at him sternly. Mr. Cole, please sit down. You will have an opportunity to speak through your attorney. But Your Honor, sit down, Mr. Cole, or I will hold you in contempt. Marcus sat, his face burning with humiliation and rage. Behind him, he could hear Richard and Sandra whispering frantically, their voices rising in panic as they realized what was happening. All their plans, all their schemes, all their expectations of money and luxury were evaporating like smoke. Gerald continued as if Marcus had never interrupted. Furthermore, Your Honor, I would like to present evidence that Mr. Cole's marriage to Mrs. Thornton was entered into under fraudulent pretenses. Mr. Ademi shot to his feet again. Objection, that is a serious accusation with no basis in. I have recordings, Gerald said simply, and the courtroom went dead silent. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Gerald pulled out a small digital device and held it up for the judge to see. 3 months ago, Mrs. Thornton installed security cameras in her home due to concerns about her safety given her deteriorating health. These cameras captured several conversations between Mr. Cole and his family members, as well as conversations between Mr. Cole and a woman named Jasmine Hart. With the court's permission, I would like to play some of these recordings. Judge Okonkwo nodded. Proceed. Gerald pressed a button, and suddenly Marcus's voice filled the courtroom, clear and damning. I have been patient, baby, but it will be worth it. Once she is gone, I inherit everything. Half of everything at minimum if I divorce her. Either way, we are set for life. You and me, Jasmine, we can have it all. Marcus wanted to disappear. He wanted the floor to swallow him whole. He could feel every eye in the courtroom on him, judging him, condemning him. He heard Sandra gasp behind him. He heard Richard curse under his breath. But the recording was not finished. Jasmine's voice came through next, tinny but clear. She is too weak to do anything about it. She can barely get out of bed. What is she going to do? Fight you? Be smart. Act now before it is too late. Then came another recording, this one from a different day. Richard's voice filled the courtroom. You have been patient for so long, Marcus, but it is finally time to collect. Get that divorce, take half of everything. You deserve it, we deserve it. My people, I know you are feeling the weight of this moment right now. Marcus thought he had it all figured out, but Diana was 10 steps ahead the entire time. If this story has you shook, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think Marcus deserves. Subscribe to this channel because stories like this are what we do here, and trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next. Now let's get back to that courtroom because Diana is not done yet. Judge Okonkwo raised her hand and Gerald stopped the recordings. The silence that followed was suffocating. The judge looked at Marcus with an expression that could have frozen fire. Mr. Cole, these recordings suggest that you married Mrs. Thornton with the intention of eventually acquiring her wealth, either through inheritance or divorce. They also suggest that you engaged in an extramarital affair while your wife was seriously ill. Do you deny these allegations? Marcus opened his mouth but no words came out. What could he possibly say? The recordings were real. His voice was unmistakable. Every word he had spoken in secret had just been broadcast to an entire courtroom. Mr. Ademi stood shakily. Your Honor, my client. That is, we would need time to review these recordings and verify their authenticity before. The recordings have already been verified by an independent forensic audio expert, Gerald said, handing another document to the judge. His report is included in the materials I submitted. The recordings are authentic, unedited, and were legally obtained from security cameras installed in Mrs. Thornton's private residence. Judge Okonkwo spent several long minutes reading through the audio expert's report. When she finally looked up, her expression was one of barely concealed disgust. I have seen many divorce cases in my career, but this is particularly egregious. Mr. Cole, you married a woman of substantial means, waited until she became seriously ill, and then attempted to claim half of her life's work based on a marriage that appears to have been built on deception and greed. Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and frustration, and the terrible realization that he had lost everything. Judge Okonkwo continued, her voice hard and final. However, the recordings, while morally reprehensible, do not change the legal reality of this case. Mrs. Thornton's assets are held in a family trust that predates this marriage by decades. Mr. Cole has no legal claim to any property, account, or business interest held by that trust. Furthermore, since Mrs. Thornton personally owns no significant assets, there is nothing to distribute in this divorce. She looked down at her notes, then back up at Marcus. The divorce is granted. Mrs. Thornton and Mr. Cole are hereby legally separated. Mr. Cole's claim for equitable distribution of assets is denied in its entirety. Mr. Cole's request for spousal support is also denied, given the evidence presented regarding the nature of this marriage. This court finds that Mr. Cole entered into this marriage with fraudulent intent, and therefore forfeits any right to financial support from Mrs. Thornton or her estate. The gavel came down with a sound that echoed through Marcus's soul like a death knell. Court is adjourned. Marcus sat frozen in his chair as the courtroom erupted in whispered conversations. He heard Richard shouting something behind him, heard Sandra crying, but their voices sounded distant, like they were underwater. All he could focus on was Diana, who was being wheeled toward the courtroom exit by her lawyer. She passed him without a word, without even a glance, as if he no longer existed. Marcus stumbled to his feet and pushed past his lawyer, past his siblings, past the people staring at him with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. He burst through the courtroom doors and found himself in the hallway, where Jasmine was waiting. She looked at him expectantly, her face bright with anticipation. So, she asked, reaching for his hand, "How much did you get? When do we celebrate?" Marcus pulled his hand away as if her touch burned him. "Nothing," he said, his voice hollow. "I got nothing." Jasmine's smile faltered. "What do you mean nothing?" your lawyer said. "It was all in a trust," Marcus said, and he could hear the hysteria creeping into his voice. "Everything, every property, every account, every business, all of it belongs to a trust under her dead mother's name. I get nothing, nothing." Jasmine's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, horror, and then, finally, cold calculation. "So you are telling me we went through all of this, you divorced your wife, you burned every bridge, and you walked away with nothing?" "That is exactly what I am telling you." Jasmine stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus watched as whatever affection she had pretended to have for him drained from her eyes like water through a sieve. "You are pathetic," she said finally. "You had one job, Marcus. One job, and you failed." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and Marcus knew he would never see her again. Why would she stay? There was no money, no mansion, no luxury vacations. He was just a divorced man with nothing to his name and a recording of his own voice proving what a monster he was. Richard and Sandra caught up to him in the hallway, both of them furious. How could you let this happen? Richard demanded. How could you not know about that trust? You have been married to her for 5 years. I did not know, Marcus shouted back. She never told me, she hid it from me. She did not hide anything, Sandra said bitterly. You just never bothered to ask the right questions. You were too busy spending her money to actually understand where it came from. They left him standing alone in the hallway, their disappointment and anger trailing behind them like toxic fumes. Marcus knew he would never hear from them again either. Family only sticks around when there is something to gain. He walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sunlight, and it felt like mockery. The world was beautiful and warm, and his life was in ruins. He pulled out his phone and saw that his bank account, the one Diana had been depositing his allowance into every month, had been closed. His credit cards, the ones tied to her accounts, had been cancelled. Even his car, the luxury vehicle parked in the courthouse lot, would have to be returned because Diana had been the one making the payments. He had nothing, less than nothing. He had his clothes, his phone, and a reputation that was about to be destroyed when word of this court case spread through their social circles. Diana had not just defeated him, she had erased him. Meanwhile, across town, Diana sat in her lawyer's office, looking out the window at the Lagos skyline. Gerald sat across from her, a rare smile on his usually serious face. Your mother would be incredibly proud of you, he said quietly. Diana nodded, her eyes distant. She taught me to protect what I build. I just wish I had not needed to learn this lesson at all. I loved him, Gerald, I really did. I know, Gerald said gently. But some people only love what they can take from you. He was always going to show you who he really was. You just made sure you were prepared when he did. Diana's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from her doctor reminding her of her next appointment. She looked at it and felt something shift inside her. For months, she had been so focused on protecting her empire from Marcus that she had almost forgotten to fight for herself. But now, with that battle won, she could focus on the most important fight of all. The fight for her health. The fight for her life. What happens now? Gerald asked. Diana turned from the window and looked at her lawyer with eyes that held the steel that had built an empire. Now I will rebuild, not the business, that never crumbled, but me. I will rebuild myself. I find new treatments. I fight this illness with everything I have. And I make sure that my mother's legacy continues long after I am gone. And Marcus, Diana's expression did not change. Marcus does not exist anymore. He made his choice. He chose greed over love. He chose betrayal over loyalty. And now he lives with the consequences. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small photograph. It was a picture of her mother, taken years ago, standing in front of the first property they had ever owned. Elizabeth Thornton looked fierce and proud and unbreakable, just like her daughter. Thank you, Mama, Diana whispered to the photographer, for protecting me even now. Gerald stood to leave but paused at the door. Diana, if you ever need anything at all, you know where to find me. I know, Diana said, but I think the worst is behind me now. As Gerald left, Diana sat alone in the office, looking out at the city she had conquered through sheer will and determination. Marcus had thought he could take it from her. He had thought she was weak because she was sick. He had thought her illness made her vulnerable. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. She was her mother's daughter, and nothing, not illness, not betrayal, not greed, could break a woman who had been built from the same steel that had survived poverty, loss, and every challenge life could throw at her. Marcus was out there somewhere, probably crying about his lost fortune, probably trying to figure out how to survive without the money he had been stealing from her for years. But Diana had a different kind of wealth now. She had her freedom, she had her empire secured and protected for generations to come. She had her dignity, and most importantly, she had the satisfaction of knowing that when someone tried to destroy her, she did not just survive. She won. Marcus had walked into her life as a predator, believing he could feast on her success. He walked out with nothing but the clothes on his back, and the knowledge that he had been outsmarted by a dying woman. As Diana sat in that office, watching the sun set over Lagos, she made herself a promise. She would fight her illness with the same strength she had used to fight Marcus. She would build her health back the same way she had built her empire. And she would never, ever let anyone make her feel weak again. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was learning what it meant to lose everything. But Diana was learning what it meant to truly win. Because revenge is not about destroying your enemy. It is about protecting what is yours and walking away with your head held high. Marcus thought he had married a billionaire. He had actually married a survivor. And survivors do not lose. They adapt, they plan, they strike when the time is right. And when the dust settles, they are still standing while their enemies are nothing but echoes of their own greed. Diana closed her eyes and smiled. It was over. But as she sat there in the fading light, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Thornton, my name is Detective James Okoro. I need to speak with you urgently about your ex-husband Marcus Cole. He has been seen meeting with several individuals who have expressed interest in challenging the legitimacy of your family trust. I believe he may be planning something. Please call me as soon as possible." Diana's smile faded. She looked at the message, then out at the city, then back at the message. Marcus had lost everything in that courtroom. But apparently he was not done fighting, and neither was she.